Dr. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the environmental chamber, his breathing heavy from the rigorous physical tests. The Galactic Research Station orbiting Kepler 440 be hummed with activity, its corridors filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. For 3 months now, Marcus had been the only human among the station's crew of 200 researchers, and every day brought new challenges. The testing facility gleamed under artificial light that mimicked the wavelengths preferred by the station's dominant species, the Zephyrians. Their tall, crystalline forms moved gracefully through the halls, their internal light patterns shifting with their emotions. Marcus had learned to read some of these patterns, though he suspected they found his solid, opaque form equally puzzling. Subject 247 Alpha, please report to Laboratory 7, the station's AI announced in its neutral tone. Marcus sighed. Subject 247 Alpha. That was him. Despite his doctorate in xenobiology and his selection as Earth's representative to this prestigious research expedition, he was still treated more like a specimen than a colleague. Dr. Cathara Velnoth waited for him in the laboratory, her 7-foot frame casting prismatic patterns on the walls. As the station's lead xenophysiologist, she had been studying Marcus with an intensity that made him increasingly uncomfortable. Her elongated head tilted as he entered, the blue-green glow within her translucent body pulsing faster. "You are late again," she observed, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "This is the 14th instance of temporal deviation from scheduled appointments." Marcus shrugged, a gesture he knew confused most of the alien researchers. Traffic was murder in the halls, had to wait for that Gorvan delegation to finish their territorial display. Cathara's internal light shifted to a pattern Marcus had come to associate with confusion. "You speak of murder, yet you show no distress indicators. Your species' communication protocols remain highly inefficient." "It's called sarcasm," Marcus explained, settling onto the examination platform. "We use exaggeration and irony to express frustration or humor." "Humor," Cathara repeated the word as if tasting it. "Another inefficiency, energy expended for no productive outcome." Marcus bit back his response. This was exactly why he'd been avoiding these sessions. Every conversation with Cathara felt like being dissected by someone who viewed emotions as mathematical equations to be solved. She approached everything with the cold logic that had made her species the galaxy's premier scientists, but it also made her completely miss the point of what made humans human. "Today's examination will focus on your stress responses," Cathara announced, activating a series of holographic displays. "Your cortisol levels show significant elevation during our previous sessions, yet you continue to exhibit avoidance behaviors." "Maybe because being poked and prodded like a lab rat isn't exactly relaxing," Marcus muttered. "You are not a rat, you are a highly evolved primate. The comparison is scientifically inaccurate." Marcus stared at her, wondering if she was being deliberately obtuse or if her species simply lacked the capacity for understanding metaphor. "It's another way of saying I don't like being treated like an experimental subject instead of a colleague." Cathara's patterns shifted again, this time to what Marcus recognized as intense curiosity. "You wish to be treated as an equal researcher despite your species' obvious limitations." "Limitations?" Marcus felt his temper rising. "What limitations?" "Your short lifespan results in impulsive decision-making. Your emotional responses interfere with logical processes. Your physical form is fragile and requires constant maintenance. Your technology is primitive compared to most spacefaring species." She listed these points with the same tone she might use to describe the properties of a chemical compound. Marcus stood up abruptly, his movement causing several monitoring devices to beep in alarm. "You know what your problem is, Cathara? You're so focused on measuring and categorizing everything that you miss what's actually important." "Please elaborate. What am I failing to observe?" "You want to know why I've been avoiding these sessions?" Marcus stepped closer to the towering scientist. "Because every time I come in here, you remind me that my entire species is considered inferior. You treat our emotions like malfunctions, our creativity like chaos, and our short lives like a design flaw." Cathara's light patterns flickered rapidly. "I am attempting to understand your species' unique characteristics. How is this offensive?" "Because you're not trying to understand us," Marcus said, his voice growing heated. "You're trying to explain us away. You want to reduce everything we are to simple biological functions and evolutionary mistakes. Is this not accurate? Your species achieved spaceflight only recently. Your conflicts are numerous and illogical. Your resource management is inefficient. And yet here I am. Marcus spread his arms wide, standing in your advanced laboratory, contributing to research that your superior species found valuable enough to request human participation in. For the first time since he'd known her, Kithara's internal light went completely dark for several seconds. When it returned, the patterns were unlike anything Marcus had seen before. "Continue," she said simply. Marcus took a deep breath, realizing he had Kithara's complete attention for the first time since arriving at the station. Her crystalline form remained perfectly still, waiting for him to continue. "You want to understand humans? Then let me tell you what you're missing." Marcus began packing around the laboratory, his hands gesturing as he spoke. "Yes, we're short-lived compared to your species. Your people live for thousands of years, mine barely reach a century. But do you know what that means?" Kithara's light patterns remained steady, focused. "It means insufficient time for comprehensive learning and development." "It means every moment matters," Marcus countered. "When you have unlimited time, you can afford to be cautious, to spend centuries analyzing every decision. We don't have that luxury. We have to act, to take risks, to make choices with incomplete information because waiting might mean missing our only chance." He stopped in front of a holographic display showing comparative brain scans between species. "You see our emotional responses as interference, but those emotions are what drive us to attempt the impossible. Fear pushes us to innovate when faced with extinction. Love makes us sacrifice everything for others. Anger gives us the strength to fight against overwhelming odds." Kithara's internal glow shifted to a pattern Marcus had never seen before, rapid pulses interspersed with steady beams. "Your emotional states do correlate with increased problem-solving in crisis situations. However, they also lead to suboptimal choices." "Sometimes the suboptimal choice is the right one," Marcus said. 3 years ago, Earth received the invitation to join this research station. Every logical analysis said we weren't ready. Our technology was primitive, our understanding of galactic politics minimal. The rational choice would have been to decline and spend another century preparing. "Yet humanity accepted immediately," Kithara observed. "Because we understood something your analysis missed. Opportunities don't wait for perfect preparation. If we'd waited until we were ready by galactic standards, the invitation might never have come again." Marcus pulled up a holographic display of Earth, the blue marble spinning slowly in the artificial light. "You mentioned our conflicts and inefficient resource management. You're right, we fight among ourselves, we make mistakes, we waste resources on seemingly pointless endeavors. But do you know why? Evolutionary programming that no longer serves a useful function," Kithara replied, though her tone seemed less certain than before. "Because we refuse to accept limitations," Marcus said firmly. "Every war, every conflict, every waste of resources stems from humans who believed things could be better and were willing to fight for that belief. Yes, it's often misguided. Yes, it causes suffering, but it's also why we never stop pushing boundaries." He gestured toward the laboratory equipment around them. "Your species perfected this technology thousands of years ago and have barely improved it since. Why innovate when you have eternity to work with existing solutions? But humans, we arrived here 3 months ago with primitive equipment, and I've already submitted 17 improvement suggestions to the station's engineering department." Kithara's patterns flickered rapidly. 14 of those suggestions were deemed interesting by the engineering staff. 3 have been approved for testing. "Because we see problems where you see acceptable limitations," Marcus continued. "Your environmental systems work perfectly for Zephyrian physiology, but they're harsh for most other species. You've accepted that as a necessary compromise. I saw it as a challenge to solve. The atmospheric recycling modifications you proposed would indeed improve comfort for multiple species," Kithara admitted. "But the energy expenditure increase was deemed excessive." Marcus smiled. "Excessive by what standard? You have practically unlimited power from the station's fusion reactors. The only reason not to implement the changes is because acceptable was considered good enough. Efficiency is a fundamental principle of advanced civilization." "Efficiency is stagnation if taken too far," Marcus shot back. "You want to know what makes humans unique? We're the only species I've encountered here that consistently chooses the harder path when we believe it leads to something better. He activated another display, showing the station's research projects. Look at the assignment roster. Most species send their most experienced researchers, centuries or millennia old, with established expertise in narrow fields. Earth sent me, a 34-year-old generalist with expertise in multiple disciplines but mastery of none. Your lack of specialization was noted as a potential limitation, Kithara said. And yet, I'm the only researcher here working on cross-disciplinary projects, Marcus pointed out. While everyone else focuses on their particular area of expertise, I'm looking at how xenobiology intersects with quantum physics, how cultural anthropology relates to stellar engineering, how psychology affects mathematical modeling. Kithara's light patterns shifted again, more complex than before. Your preliminary report on the correlation between species psychology and their preferred mathematical frameworks was unexpected. Because you never thought to look for connections outside your area of expertise, Marcus said. That's what I mean about our supposed limitations being strengths. Yes, we don't live long enough to become ultimate specialists in one field, but that forces us to make connections others miss. He turned to face her directly. You study stress responses in various species, but have you ever considered why humans show different stress patterns when working in teams versus alone? Team dynamics are not within my research parameters. Exactly my point. You compartmentalize everything. Humans see the whole picture even if we don't understand all the details. Kithara remained silent for several minutes, her internal light cycling through patterns Marcus had never observed before. Finally, she spoke. Your perspective suggests that what we have classified as limitations may serve functional purposes we have not recognized. Now you're getting it, Marcus said. Every species here is more advanced than humanity in some way. Stronger, longer-lived, more intelligent in specific areas, better technology. But advancement isn't just about individual capabilities. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to try things that logic says shouldn't work. This hypothesis requires further investigation, Kithara said, her patterns settling into what Marcus recognized as deep contemplation. Then maybe it's time to change how you're investigating. Kithara's crystalline form shifted, her internal light patterns cycling through configurations Marcus had never witnessed before. The silence in the laboratory stretched for nearly 5 minutes before she finally spoke. Explain this alternative investigation methodology you suggest. Marcus felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she wasn't dismissing his ideas outright. Stop treating me like a test subject and start treating me like a research partner. Instead of measuring my reactions to predetermined stimuli, work with me to understand why humans respond the way we do. This would deviate significantly from established scientific protocols. Your established protocols are designed for studying non-sentient subjects or analyzing data from willing participants who think like you do, Marcus pointed out. They're not designed for understanding a completely different kind of intelligence. Kithara moved to the laboratory's main console, her elongated fingers dancing across interfaces designed for her species' anatomy. The Station Council expects quantifiable results from my research. Subjective collaboration would not produce the data matrices they require. Then give them both, Marcus suggested. Continue your quantitative measurements, but supplement them with qualitative understanding. Show them not just what humans do, but why we do it and how that why might be valuable. The alien scientist paused, her light patterns shifting to what Marcus had learned indicated uncertainty. The Council has already expressed concern about the efficiency of human integration into station operations. Several members question whether your species' inclusion was a mistake. What kind of concerns? Marcus felt a chill despite the laboratory's controlled temperature. The hegemony representative filed a formal complaint about human unpredictability after Dr. Williams modified the agricultural bay's nutrient systems without authorization. The collective's delegates cited human emotional volatility when Engineer Rodriguez argued with their senior technician about safety protocols. Marcus groaned. He'd heard about both incidents but hadn't realized they'd reached the council level. And what did you tell them? I provided objective data on human stress responses and cognitive patterns. I noted that human behaviors, while irregular, have not caused any actual safety incidents or significant operational disruptions. Damning with faint praise, Marcus muttered. Your species faces potential removal from the research program within 2 months, unless I can demonstrate clear value in human participation. Kithara continued, her patterns now definitely showing what Marcus interpreted as concern. The weight of that revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Humanity's first real step into the galactic community, and they were already being considered a failure. You're saying my species' future in space might depend on what you report to the Council. The implications extend beyond this station. Several species have expressed interest in establishing formal contact with Earth based on the results of this integration experiment. Negative results would significantly delay such contact. Marcus sat down heavily on one of the laboratory stools, suddenly understanding the real stakes involved. This wasn't just about scientific research or even his personal experience. Earth's entire relationship with galactic civilization hung in the balance. Why didn't you tell me this before? The information was classified above your clearance level. I am sharing it now because I believe your perspective may be essential to completing my research successfully. Marcus looked up at the towering alien scientist, seeing her in an entirely new light. You're not just studying humans for academic curiosity, you're trying to save our species' future. I am attempting to understand whether human cognitive patterns and behavioral tendencies offer sufficient value to offset their disruptive effects on established systems. Show me the data, Marcus said suddenly. Which data? All of it, every measurement, every report, every council concern. If we're going to prove humanity's value, I need to understand exactly what evidence you've been collecting. Kithara hesitated. Much of that information exceeds your authorization parameters. You just told me my species' future depends on your research, Marcus said firmly. I'd say that gives me a pretty compelling need to know. After several moments of consideration, Kithara began activating holographic displays around the laboratory. Charts, graphs, behavioral analyses, and incident reports filled the space around them. Marcus stood slowly, taking in the overwhelming amount of data that represented 3 months of intensive study of human behavior. These stress measurements, he said, pointing to one chart, what do they actually measure? Cortisol levels, heart rate variability, brain wave patterns during decision-making scenarios, Kithara explained. The patterns are unlike any other species we have studied. Marcus examined the data more closely. This spike here, when was this recorded? During the Gorvan territorial dispute you referenced earlier. Most species show elevated stress during such encounters and actively avoid the situation until resolution occurs. But humans don't. Correct, human subjects showed initial stress elevation, but then demonstrated adaptation behaviors. Heart rate stabilized, cortisol levels decreased, and brain activity shifted to problem-solving patterns. Marcus smiled grimly. Because we're used to dealing with territorial conflicts, we've been doing it for our entire evolutionary history. Yet the Gorgons are significantly larger and more physically imposing than humans. Physical size isn't the only factor in territorial disputes, Marcus explained. We evaluate multiple variables: actual threat level, escape routes, potential allies, long-term consequences of backing down versus confronting the situation. Kithara's patterns shifted to what Marcus now recognized as intense interest. You are suggesting that human responses are not random emotional reactions, but complex strategic calculations. Exactly. What you're interpreting as unpredictability is actually rapid threat assessment and adaptive response selection. Marcus moved to another display showing incident reports. This argument engineer Rodriguez had with the collective's technician. What was it about? The technician recommended shutting down a power coupling for routine maintenance. Rodriguez insisted on additional safety protocols that would require an extra day of work. And Rodriguez was right, wasn't she? Kithara's internal light dimmed slightly. The coupling failed 12 hours after maintenance was completed. Rodriguez's additional safety protocols would have prevented the failure. So what the collective saw as emotional volatility was actually superior risk assessment based on practical experience. The technician had 3 centuries of experience with that specific system design. But Rodriguez had experience with how systems actually fail in practice, not just how they're supposed to work in theory, Marcus countered. That's the difference. Your long-lived species have the luxury of theoretical perfection. We have to deal with reality. Marcus continued examining the data, finding pattern after pattern where supposed human flaws had actually prevented problems or improved outcomes. This is incredible. You have 3 months of evidence that humans consistently add value to station operations, but it's all been interpreted as disruptive behavior. Because the value is not immediately apparent and does not conform to established efficiency metrics. Then we need to change how the value is measured, Marcus said, turning to face Kithara directly. And I know exactly how to do it. Kithara's entire form brightened with curiosity. Proceed. Marcus began packing again, his mind racing with possibilities. The Council is measuring human value using metrics designed for species that think like them. But we need to demonstrate value in terms they can understand while showing capabilities they haven't considered. How do you propose to accomplish this? By running a practical demonstration instead of just collecting data, Marcus said. Set up a real problem-solving scenario that plays to human strengths. Let me show the Council what we can do, not just measure how we respond to artificial situations. Kithara's patterns shifted to what Marcus interpreted as skepticism. The Council would need to approve any such demonstration. They are unlikely to authorize experiments that could disrupt station operations. Then we don't call it an experiment, Marcus said with a grin. We call it consulting. I do not understand. Marcus pulled up the station's operational data on one of the holographic displays. Look at this. For the past 6 months, the station has been dealing with a 15% efficiency decrease in the quantum processing arrays. The engineering teams have run diagnostics, replaced components, recalibrated systems, but the problem persists. This is classified operational information, Kithara warned. Which you just showed me, Marcus pointed out. The point is, your best engineers from a dozen different species haven't solved this problem using conventional approaches. What if we tried an unconventional approach? Explain. Marcus studied the diagnostic data more carefully. Every species here approaches problems through their particular expertise. The quantum engineers focus on quantum mechanics, the systems specialists focus on integration protocols, the materials experts focus on component degradation. But no one's looking at the interaction between all these factors. The engineering teams include representatives from multiple disciplines. But they're all thinking within established parameters, Marcus said. They assume the problem has a technical solution because it's a technical system. What if the solution isn't technical? Kithara's light patterns became more complex. Continue. Marcus pulled up more data, cross-referencing the efficiency decrease with other station metrics. The decrease started 6 months ago, right? What else changed 6 months ago? The station welcomed the largest influx of new species in its operational history. Crew complement increased by 30%. Exactly, and look at this pattern. Marcus highlighted sections of the data. The efficiency decreases correlate with peak activity periods in the habitation sectors. It's not a hardware problem, it's a usage problem. The quantum processors are not directly connected to habitation systems. No, but they share the same power grid, Marcus said excitedly. And look at this. The power fluctuations are minimal, well within tolerance, but they're constant now instead of the steady state the system was designed for. Kithara studied the correlations Marcus was highlighting. The quantum arrays were optimized for stable power input. Constant microfluctuations could theoretically cause cumulative coherence degradation. And no one noticed because each fluctuation is insignificant by itself, Marcus continued. Your engineers are trained to ignore variations within tolerance. They look for big, obvious problems. But humans look for patterns that should not exist. Right, we're paranoid by nature. We see problems where others see normal variation. Marcus pulled up another display. The solution isn't replacing hardware or recalibrating software. It's installing buffer systems to smooth out the microfluctuations. Kithara was silent for several minutes, her internal patterns cycling rapidly through configurations Marcus couldn't interpret. Finally, she spoke. This hypothesis can be tested without disrupting normal operations. And if I'm right, we solve a problem that's been stumping your best engineers for months, Marcus said. That should get the Council's attention. Indeed, but this is only one example. The Council requires evidence of consistent value, not isolated successes. Marcus grinned. Then let's give them consistent value. I've been observing station operations for 3 months. I've identified at least a dozen situations where human perspective could improve efficiency or solve ongoing problems. Such as the agricultural bays yield fluctuations, the persistent communication delays in Sector 7, the mysterious energy drain in the recreational facilities, the ongoing dispute between the hegemony and collective research teams about resource allocation. Marcus counted off on his fingers. Every one of these problems has been approached using conventional methods. Every one of them is still unsolved. Cathara's patterns shifted to what Marcus now recognized as excitement. You believe human cognitive approaches could resolve these issues. I believe human cognitive approaches could contribute to resolving these issues, Marcus corrected. The key is collaboration, not replacement. Your species bring expertise and experience we can't match, but we bring perspective and adaptability you don't have. This would require authorization from the station director. Then let's get authorization, Marcus said. But first, let's prove the concept with the quantum processing problem. If we can solve that, the director will have to take notice. Cathara moved to her console and began entering commands. I am requesting access to the quantum engineering section for collaborative consultation. Dr. Veloreth will not be pleased to have his work reviewed by others. Then frame it as expanding the research scope of your human studies, Marcus suggested. You're investigating human problem-solving approaches in practical applications. Accurate if incomplete, Cathara acknowledged. Very well, Dr. Veloreth has agreed to a consultation session tomorrow morning. Marcus felt a surge of nervous excitement. Tomorrow would be his first real opportunity to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. What should I expect? Dr. Veloreth is the station's senior quantum engineer. His species, the architects, have been designing quantum systems for millennia. He will not appreciate suggestions from what he considers a primitive species. Great, no pressure at all. Cathara's patterns shifted to something Marcus hadn't seen before. Was that amusement? Indeed. The fate of your species' galactic future rests on your ability to convince an ancient, proud, and extremely intelligent alien that your unproven theories have merit. Marcus laughed despite the stress. When you put it like that, it sounds almost easy. I do not understand that response. It's called gallows humor, Marcus explained. We laugh at impossible situations because the alternative is panic. Another example of supposed inefficiency that may serve a functional purpose, Cathara observed. Now you're catching on, Marcus said. Tomorrow, I'll show Dr. Veloreth that sometimes the best solutions come from looking at problems sideways instead of head-on. And if you are incorrect? Marcus considered the question seriously. Then my species loses its chance at joining the galactic community, and I personally become responsible for setting back human space exploration by decades or centuries. Does this possibility not generate significant stress responses? Marcus smiled. Absolutely, but it also generates determination. That's the thing about humans, we do our best work when everything is on the line. /. The quantum engineering section hummed with energy that made Marcus's teeth ache. Dr. Veloreth, an imposing figure even by architect standards, loomed over the central console like a metallic mountain. His species had evolved from silicon-based life forms, giving them natural affinity for electronic systems and a lifespan measured in geological ages. Dr. Cathara, Veloreth's voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously. I fail to understand why you have brought this, juvenile, to observe our quantum systems. Dr. Chen has proposed a hypothesis regarding the efficiency degradation in your processing arrays, Cathara explained, her own patterns showing signs of nervousness. His perspective may offer insights we have not considered. Veloreth's optical sensors focused on Marcus with obvious skepticism. A human seeks to instruct architects in quantum mechanics. How? Quaint. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering everything riding on this moment. I'm not here to teach you about quantum mechanics, Dr. Veloreth. I'm here to share a different way of looking at the problem you're facing. The problem is simple, Velorath stated dismissively. System efficiency has decreased without identifiable cause. We have examined every component, every connection, every quantum state configuration. The hardware functions perfectly. That's exactly why you haven't found the answer, Marcus said quietly. The massive alien's form shifted, metal plates realigning in what Marcus interpreted as surprise. Explain. You've been looking for what's broken, but what if nothing's broken? What if the problem is that the system is working exactly as designed, but the operating conditions have changed? Velorath accessed the diagnostic displays with movements too fast for Marcus to follow. Operating parameters remain within specification. Power input stable, environmental conditions controlled, quantum coherence maintained. But those are steady-state measurements, Marcus said, stepping closer to the displays. Can you show me real-time fluctuation data over the past 6 months? Fluctuations are negligible, Velorath replied, but began accessing the requested data. Minor variations exist but fall well within tolerance thresholds. Marcus studied the patterns appearing on the holographic displays. There it was, exactly what he'd suspected from the previous day's analysis. Dr. Cathara, can you overlay this with station population and activity data? The correlation was immediately visible once both datasets appeared together. Every tiny power fluctuation corresponded to activity spikes in different sectors of the station. Fascinating, Velorath admitted reluctantly. The correlations are undeniable, but these fluctuations are minimal. Minimal individually, Marcus interrupted. But quantum systems are sensitive to cumulative effects, aren't they? Thousands of tiny interruptions in coherence, each one insignificant, but together creating a degradation pattern that builds over time. Velorath was silent for several minutes, his optical sensors cycling through different spectrum analyses. The theory has merit, but the solution would require complete power grid redesign, a project spanning years and requiring station shutdown. Not necessarily, Marcus said with growing confidence. What if instead of redesigning the entire grid, we just install localized buffering systems, smooth out the micro-fluctuations before they reach the quantum processors? Buffering systems of the required precision would need to... Velorath stopped mid-sentence, his form shifting as he accessed additional data. Actually, such systems could be integrated into existing infrastructure. The engineering challenges are significant but manageable. Marcus felt a surge of triumph but kept his expression calm. How long to implement a prototype? With proper authorization, perhaps 10 days for initial testing, Velorath replied, his tone notably less dismissive. If successful, full implementation could be completed within a month. And the projected efficiency improvement. Velorath ran calculations that filled the air with cascading numbers and symbols. Theoretical restoration to baseline efficiency, plus an additional 3% improvement due to enhanced stability. Cathara's internal patterns had shifted to what Marcus now recognized as amazement. Dr. Velorath, would you consider this solution to represent significant value? If successful, it would represent the most efficient resolution to this problem achieved by any engineering team in the station's operational history, the architect admitted grudgingly. The human's approach was unexpected but logically sound. Marcus felt like his heart might explode from relief, but he forced himself to remain professional. Dr. Velorath, would you be willing to present this solution to the Station Council with attribution to collaborative human architect engineering? The massive alien considered this for several moments. I will present the solution as a result of interdisciplinary consultation. This accurately represents the methodology while acknowledging both human insight and architect engineering expertise. Perfect, Marcus said, then turned to Cathara. One problem solved, several more to go. Indeed, Cathara replied, her patterns now showing what Marcus could only describe as excitement. I have scheduled consultations with the agricultural specialists regarding yield fluctuations and the communications engineers about Sector 7 delays. Dr. Cathara, Velorath interrupted, I would like to participate in these additional consultations. The human's analytical approach may prove illuminating for other engineering challenges. Marcus couldn't suppress his grin any longer. You mean you want to learn how humans think? I wish to understand how a supposedly primitive species identified a solution that escaped the notice of advanced civilizations, Velorath replied with dignity. For scientific purposes. Of course, Marcus said diplomatically, for science. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood before the full station council in the main conference chamber. Representatives from 18 different species occupied their respective environmental zones. Their various forms of attention focused on him with varying degrees of interest, skepticism, or hostility. Members of the council, Station Director Thiska began, her serpentine form coiled gracefully around her speaking platform. We gather to review the assessment of human integration into our research community. Marcus's heart hammered as Kithara moved to the presentation area, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights in complex patterns. Honored Council, Kithara began, 3 months of intensive research has revealed that human cognitive patterns, initially classified as disruptive anomalies, actually represent valuable problem-solving capabilities previously unknown to our scientific community. She activated displays showing the quantum processing solution, the agricultural improvements, the communication fixes, and 6 other successful collaborations that had emerged over the past weeks. Each display included efficiency metrics, cost-benefit analyses, and endorsements from department heads. Human approaches consistently identify solutions that conventional methodologies overlook, Kithara continued. Their shorter lifespans create urgency that drives innovation. Their emotional responses provide rapid threat assessment capabilities. Their lack of specialization enables cross-disciplinary insight. What we initially interpreted as limitations are actually adaptive advantages. The hegemony representative spoke first. These results are impressive, but can we expect consistent performance from an entire species based on one individual's contributions? Marcus stepped forward. Honored representative, the approaches I've used aren't unique to me. They represent common human problem-solving strategies that any human researcher could employ. Pattern recognition, lateral thinking, risk assessment through emotional response, cross-disciplinary analysis. These are fundamental aspects of how humans think. You claim that an entire species thinks as you do. The collective delegate's synthesized voice carried skepticism. I claim that every human would approach these problems differently than I did, but using the same underlying cognitive strategies, Marcus replied. Diversity of thought is another human strength. Where other species might send their most experienced specialists, we benefit from having multiple perspectives working together. Director Thiska's optical organs fixed on Marcus. Dr. Chen, what value do you believe humanity offers to the galactic community beyond problem-solving? Marcus had prepared for this question, but the weight of it still nearly overwhelmed him. Director, we offer the perspective of a young species that remembers what it's like to struggle for survival. We see opportunities where others see acceptable limitations because we can't afford to accept limitations. We innovate because standing still means falling behind. He gestured toward the assembled representatives. Every species here has achieved greatness through specialization, longevity, and careful optimization of their capabilities. But greatness can become complacency. We offer the reminder that there are always new ways to approach old problems, new questions to ask about established answers. And what do humans gain from this association? Asked the ethereal communion's representative. Everything, Marcus answered simply. Knowledge, technology, perspective, and the opportunity to contribute to something larger than our own world. We bring enthusiasm and adaptability. You bring wisdom and expertise. Together, we can achieve things none of us could accomplish alone. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives conferred through various communication methods. Marcus stood waiting, acutely aware that the next few minutes would determine humanity's future among the stars. Finally, Director Thiska spoke. The Council recognizes the value demonstrated by human participation in station operations. Dr. Chen, your species is hereby granted full membership status in the Galactic Research Consortium. We look forward to welcoming additional human researchers to our community. Marcus felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. Thank you, Director. On behalf of humanity, I promise we won't waste this opportunity. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, Kithara approached him, her internal patterns brighter than he'd ever seen them. Dr. Chen, she said. "I believe I owe you an apology. I began this research believing I was studying an inferior species. I have learned that inferiority and superiority are inadequate concepts for describing the diversity of intelligence in the universe." Marcus smiled. "Apology accepted, and thank you, Kithara, for being willing to listen when I told you there was more to humans than your measurements could capture. Indeed, I have submitted a request to extend my research indefinitely. Human cognitive patterns require far more study than I initially anticipated." "Just remember," Marcus said with a grin, "next time you want to understand how humans think, try asking us instead of just measuring us." Kithara's patterns shifted to what Marcus finally recognized as the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. "I will remember, Dr. Chen. After all, as you have taught me, the most important discoveries often come from changing how we ask the questions." As Marcus left the council chamber, he thought about Earth and all the humans who would soon follow him to the stars. They would bring their problems and their strengths, their chaos and their creativity, their questions and their stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't be better. And the galaxy would never be the same.